Hey guys, welcome back to Splints and Whiskey. Sam Patrick here with a illustrious panel of legends amongst people in the entire space. I got you, Liz. We're going to use our appropriate terms these days. Um, we got Mike Marsh, Dr. Sam Slishman, Travis Kaufman. Of course, our illustrious creator has joined us for this legend of a meeting, Liz Arts. Before we get down to business, though, we're going to do a quick little shout out to our primary sponsor. So, Splints and Whiskey is brought to you by Life Autonomous Care Consultants. That's LACCINC.com. Go ahead and check them out for any of your supply needs, procurement needs, training needs. There might be someone on this show that you just email directly and she'll take care of you. I don't know. Yeah, just that. Spoiler alert. But yeah, so again, check out LACCINC.com, Life Autonomous Care Consultants, as they power the ability for us to come here and bring lessons learned every week. So Mike and Travis have been on the show before. I'll show my immaturity on this. I don't remember your episode numbers, but go back, check out Apple Podcasts or Spotify for those episode numbers and check out all the other episodes. So if you want to know more about them, check that out. Dr. Sam Slishman, since this is your inaugural journey, we'll get to you in a minute, but Mike, you have something to share before we jump into the intros.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for getting this all together. We're pretty excited to announce that Doc Slishman and Travis are going to be joining me for an executive protection meets the tactical emergency casualty care scenario-based training in Las Vegas on the 19th and 20th of August. I'm going to be partnering with Alexio Security and consultants that are over there. They got a brand new space for training. I got some pretty high-end dudes that are going to be doing some QCB stuff and some approaches and departures, a lot of medical threat assessment. And then I reached out and pulled in a favor. I think Travis regrets giving me his cell phone, and I definitely know the doctor does. But I will tell you that they're both going to be joining me to do some really cool scientific-based evidence, storytelling time, and then we're just going to jam straight into scenario-based training. So look forward to getting that out there, and thank you for the platform and the props.
Right on. All right, then. So, Dr. Slishman, we'll take it over to you for a quick background and intro.
Yeah, I'm Sam Slishman. I grew up in New York and did my training in University of New Mexico. That's where I started to think about medical devices. Emergency medicine has kept me fed from 2000 until lately. And I spent a lot of time tinkering in my backyard, building things and trying to improve, make better mousetraps. I can dig deeper into those mousetraps if you want, but that's
I'm sure we'll get to those rabbit holes. So are you a emergency medicine physician?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, right on. And
I did my last shift 2 years ago. So
okay.
Now I do house calls, telemedicine, and I build devices.
So you're living the best EM life right now. Where like I've got I don't know if you know Tim Talbot or Ian Wedmore. They're both living their best EM lives as well. Travis, yeah, absolutely. Travis, kick it over to you for real brief service level.
Team, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Travis Kaufman. I just retired from the U.S. Army in March of this year, and I teach at the University of Lynchburg. I run their disaster medicine and emergency medicine global health program, and then I also adjunct with Harvard faculty physicians, their disaster medicine fellowship. I actually teach an executive and dignitary protective medicine, and I am a wilderness medicine instructor at Venture Med, so kind of doing a little bit of everything. And then I work at a critical access hospital here on the border of Colorado and Kansas as an emergency medicine PA. So super happy to be here with this amazing group of people.
Right on. And Mike, we'll kick it over to you before we turn it over to Liz.
My name is Mike, and I am nowhere as smart as the other two dudes, but I have been in medicine. I'm a paramedic, 30 years in EMS, paramedic. I came from a small, quiet town in the Bay Area called Oakland. So I learned some medicine on the job training really quickly, and then definitely from the San Mateo areas and whatnot. So I found myself looking down the wrong end of a sniper rifle about 18 years ago and said, man, I should probably learn how to do this job better. And I became a tactical EMS operator and embedded. That led me to other teams where I got to be armed and not armed. It didn't really matter about that. But the tactical medicine is really about the whole 5% of the sexy stuff. It's about 95% of just keeping the operators and warriors going. And it's pretty cool to be joined with this. I literally fell into this executive protection thing, where we're trying to bring some standardization of medicine and TECC to the security guys and that are out there doing the protection for, you know, the POTUS and other folks that are out there, the State Department and whatnot. So I found a niche. These guys are eating it up, and I kind of reached out to Doc because of his Slishman wrap and other devices that he's got, and Travis with his, you know, his work at the White House and whatnot. And I just thought, man, what an amazing opportunity to get to kind of give back. So pretty neat. And thank you for allowing me to be on the show.
No, thanks for coming back on, and the creator and the mind behind Splints and Whiskey, Miss Liz Arts.
That's really all I have to offer today, boys. My name is Liz Arts, and I'm just like a rose in the middle of all these thorns. Kidding. No, it's awesome to be here. I heard who was going to be on the podcast today, and I thought, oh my gosh, I had not had the opportunity. I'm honored to meet you, Dr. Slishman, in person. I know that we have heard so many great things about the efficacy of your wrap. So thank you for that, and I can't wait to hear more about you. But Liz Arts, just hanging out with all these cute boys that if I ever get in trouble, I'm glad they're going to be my friends and protect me. I also own a small company called LACC. And if you ever need any gear, call me. All right. I have a day job.
There you go. All right. Thanks, Liz. All right, guys. So as we talked about, we're kind of focusing on, so you guys are doing an executive protection symposium training event. Executive protection is a very unique space. Travis, you have a pretty heavy background in the civil service EP space. Mike, you've worked both ends of it. I've personally done some consulting work with State Patrol out here that's responsible for governor protection, picking up some work on the training pipeline for security companies. So when it comes to executive protection, it's going to be kind of broad. Can you guys break down kind of the differences between the private space and the civil space and some of the training issues that come with both?
Travis goes first.
Travis.
So, I mean, I can talk about, you know, the government, the civil space, right? So obviously, whenever you join any of those spaces, you know, you swear an oath to the Constitution, you're working under the government, you're bound to that. And it's, you know, for me, I worked with the greatest leader of the land, you know, the President of the United States, the Vice President, their families, and of course the cabinet and all that executive medicine that comes with it. But when you look at that space, really in that executive medicine space, you have what's called Tier 1 training. And you'll see that a lot of times with Special Ops, with Delta Force CAG, with Special Forces and the Navy SEALs. You have Tier 1 training. So before you even step into that executive protection space, you have this Tier 1 training where you get some really in-depth chemical training. You get some in-depth trauma training. And then you also learn how to be a medical planner. So for me and my job, if you know, 90% of my job was actually to really make a great medical plan that fit with Secret Service's tactical plan and also the military aid to the president, their communications plan. We put that all together, and that becomes the overall tactical strategic level plan that the president gets to fall under and be safe. So I would say that's a big difference for us, is you go through that Tier 1 training before you can even say, hey, I'm a fully qualified person to protect that executive or that dignitary.
Right. I think too, that we keep talking medical planning. Like, we could do a 12-hour podcast on medical planning because, in my opinion, well, there's an episode where I give my opinion. You can go listen to it. So focusing on the federal Secret Service side, like, you have all the assets, you have all the things, like you have an ambulance that's chasing the motorcade all the time. Mike, you're doing some work now in the kind of the private EP space. I think we talked about it briefly about, all right, one of the things that I even didn't think about was, like, all right, penetrating the inner circle of like your principal. If I don't have a good medical plan, that's an exploitable realm. So this is why we need to train this for EP. First and foremost, how long have you been doing work in the EP medical space on the private side?
So I fell into training. Well, man, that's a lot to unpack, right? Because you know, I mean, I think I can say this to you because we're medics, right? And that is, when a SEER 1 event happens, or a POTUS comes in, right, into the Bay Area and stuff like that, they come in with the advanced team with the Secret Service, right? And then, of course, the Secret Service says, hey, we really need you, but we can't pay for you. But we want you to be there. We want you to be a part of this inner circle, and want you to have this ambulance and whatnot. hey, by the way, we heard that you guys have a tactical EMS team. We'd love to get that, bolted on to the TSD portion of the Secret Service, right? And I was blessed. I was seriously was blessed. Obama was doing the campaign trail up and down Northern California, Silicon Valley. And it was not like one or two times. It was many, many times that we were deployed rapidly for, hey, we need to shake the sugar trees for some money, right? And so there would be some quick bolt-ons into the Secret Service. Well, the first time it was really, really cool and like, man, this is super neat. And they give me a little pin so I didn't get smoke checked by the snipers, right? And it was kind of neat. And everyone was like, oh, hush, hush, and you can't talk about it. And then it turned into I wanted to know more. And then so like the advanced teams would go to Stanford Hospital, right? And they would sit there and they would have an operator there. They would have one of the Secret Service agents that would be riding in the ambulance with us, right? They had, we were attached to the Hammer team that was out there. And I started learning about medical threat assessments and looking at how it all works because, and I know this sounds super stupid when I say it, you just can't dump like a Bill Gates or an Obama in the ER, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, he's having a heart attack. Can we triage him? Get bed 4 in the hallway, please, right? Right? You don't get to do that with these folks. So it opened up my mind to just kind of learning more. And then I found out that the SWAT teams that I were attached to, they were being tapped to do Dig Pro executive protection stuff. So I would have to tell you that I have been touching it for about 18 years. I have been kind of fully into it for the last 2 to 3 years. And I have found that there are so many different levels, right? Like Travis had just said, like tier 1 have all the assets coming in, man, you are on it. And then there's like, don't have all the assets. Now you have private funding and money into it, and you're trying to lay those into permissive environment laws and regulations. So
Right.
super, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's there are so many layers to go into this and all that. But like for so Doc Slishman, I'm going to kick it over to you since you kind of have the physician level background. One of the hardest things that we see in the pre-hospital space is we're trying to replicate like facility level emergency medical care in austere environments. You start looking at some of these EP teams, like, all right, if you have a high level principal that we don't want going into a system, all right, they're going to build up this system. They may have a physician on that team. What are some of the challenges from your level on replicating like the closest thing to for lack of a better term, a level 1 trauma center for somebody that doesn't want to enter a system? It's complex, I know. Sorry.
I am going to back up just slightly here and say I've never dealt with executives. I like to point out early on, I suffer from severe imposter syndrome. So I have spikes of knowledge. I can tell you a lot about bleeding control. I can tell you a lot about broken femurs and the like, but I've never had to manage a Bill Gates. I spent a decade building a rehab center in New Mexico. So I have never protected executives. When I went to another course of Mike's, my learning curve was near vertical. So Mike is very humble. He likes to talk about how other people are smart, but I learned quite a bit from him. So my role in all of this is teaching about bleeding, but in terms of how best to manage executive protection, I'm learning with everybody else.
Right on. Well, I appreciate the humility because I learn something new every day from doing this job, and that's probably the reason why I like it. But we'll roll it back to bleeding control because I think one thing that's a common thread and that I hammer on heavily is like I have a saying that aggressive BLS prevents the need for ALS. What are some of your techniques that you use to emphasize that to your students or people that you're educating?
Well, for me, I'll say that I started thinking about bleeding control 20 years ago. There was a combat medic who handed me the London Bridge tourniquet. This has to be it has to be possible to make this lighter and easier. He said, can you make something one-handed and lighter and less painful? And so I spent 20 years thinking about tourniquets in particular and seeing different ones come out. And just trying to figure out sort of the science of it. And the arc of all of that leads me to the untrained civilian or the executive protection person who maybe will never deal with this at all. And at the end of the day, my stop the bleed class is actually pretty linear. You know, if
Yeah.
you see bleeding, you apply pressure to that bleeding. Like that's I, I really don't love today's approach where we are teaching tourniquet first because you can make people worse with that. So if
Yes.
you're not particularly strong, if you don't know what you're looking at, if you think any amount of bleeding is bad, which frankly, if you don't see me bleeding much, most bleeding is bad.
Yes.
Just go straight to tourniquet. I would like the general public and people protecting executives to always see bleeding, put pressure on bleeding, and
Yeah.
I think it's it's a pretty straightforward approach too.
So I just wanted to jump in real quick, Sam, just for this, this is why I think the synergy between Travis and Doc and myself work for this class, right? Doc has this humbling tool. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's called the bloodlet meter, right?
Hmm.
Or whatever he calls it, and it is literally 1,000 bag on top and 1,000 bag on the bottom, and he puts red dye on it and he turns it over and it bleeds out through this thing that he's super smart and will tell you all about. But I will tell you, I don't know about you, Travis, but when you go shooting and you hit that shot clock, right? That stress inoculation, that beep, and then you're trying to put targets on the the bullets on the range. His little bleeding tube stressed me out more than anything else because because I'm sitting there trying to stop the bleed, and I'm telling these folks how to do it in the executive protection. They're like, I'm just trying to get out to the car to drive them to the hospital. I'm like, yeah, but if you don't deal with this, then this is what happens, right? And so it really layers the tactical in it. So having someone removed from the EP world and the EMS world just to deal with anatomy and physiology, and then the austere side of Travis, man, I feel like there's something there. And I've been talking to you, I feel like there's so much that goes into this world of just medicine and layperson and whatnot. So I just wanted to give prop that he is the most quiet stress inoculation shot I have ever met in my entire life.
Well, it's one of those hitting the anatomy. So you mentioned anatomy. I'm a huge proponent of if you can understand anatomy and physiology, you can stopgap pretty much any life threat that's an acute, time-sensitive life threat because it's just an anatomical understanding. Doc Slishman, I really like that. When Mike showed me your little bleeding tube, for lack of a better term, what the heck are those sand timer thingamabobbers?
Hourglass.
Hourglass. Thank you. The blood hourglass. There you go. There's a new name for it. Because it gives students that recognition of okay, I do have only this much time. And to be fair, here's another fun fact that we always overlook is, okay, I know it's not arbitrary across the board, but if I lose 2 liters of blood, I'm probably going to be in irreversible shock. If I don't do immediate aggressive resuscitation for that patient's probably not going to do well in the ICU. They may make it to the ICU alive, I should say. But had I done that aggressive, simple bleeding control that you mentioned earlier, I could have stopgapped that all while I'm thinking about applying a tool. So I'm gonna kick it over to Travis real quick so we can spread the love around. So Travis, with your work with the Secret Service, how much emphasis was placed on that tiered response, and particularly the focus on, hey, if the paramedic level provider has to get their hands legitimately dirty, did we fail training the tiers before them?
Oh no, I don't. Not, I wouldn't say we failed them. I would say here's kind of how it looks in in that space, and I can tell you from my experience when we talk about leading and we talk about chemical, because the first person we'll talk about POTUS, right? The first person on POTUS is not Doc. First
Right.
person on POTUS is Secret Service, right? They're going to be the first ones, and I hate to say it, before we worry about bleeding or all that, but we have to get them off the X. We got to get them out of the. We say care under fire, right? That's the military side of TCCC or TECC, but really you got to get them out. So, and that can be very difficult. And you guys saw earlier, I mean, when POTUS, and that happened in Pennsylvania, You got to get them out of there pretty fast. You know, there's lots of armchair quarterbacks could talk about how they did. I thought they did pretty great, but you got to get them out of there
Mhm.
first because if he keeps getting shot, it doesn't matter. And then they may be the first ones to actually throw the tourniquet on, but usually Doc's right there. So, you know, we always do the sustainment training for us personally with Secret Service to at least do the one-handed tourniquet, usually a cat tourniquet or a soft T. I do feel what you're saying there, Dr. Schlishman, for sure, putting pressure on it. It just sometimes whenever there's bullets flying or there's explosions around you, sometimes that's your first step. And then you go back and reassess, which is something I always put in all of my training, especially my past 4 years training Ukrainians, train about 1,000 Ukrainians, and reassessing the tourniquet's a big deal. But
Mm.
but I will tell you, this is kind of a weird thing in that executive space. Is me as the doc on the ground, I'm only worried about POTUS. I know that sounds really weird, but
Yeah.
a Secret Service agent could be shot, and I will walk over him to get to POTUS because that's my job. So we make sure that they focus on training each other how to put their own tourniquet on, how to put pressure on each other, and that's where Mike Marsh comes in, and those tactical medical teams, they're there to take care of Secret Service. So it's good to have those teams to augment because, yeah, I wouldn't say we failed that sustainment training, but I couldn't necessarily say when's the last time you took out your tourniquet and tried to put it on yourself or put it on your buddy,
Well,
Yeah.
or putting pressure on an injury.
yeah, and that brings up a valid point about the EP space that we tend to not necessarily overlook. It's like, and we talked about it briefly before we jumped into things like, all right, the principle and the other principles that are built under that umbrella of that the hierarchy of people, like, are all that you're technically worried about. Like
Mhm.
the agents, and this is where private executive protection is a weird space. It's like, all right, like you're expected to get shot for the principle and someone's going to step over you to get to the exfil vehicle and you might be left on the X, which
100%.
Mhm.
it's a weird spot to me. But like, and I'm going to ask Dr. Slishman about this. How much of when you're doing stop the bleed training, one of the things I find hardest and like some of the biggest training scars we've created is if I'm the patient and I get shot, what do? You lie down on the ground and wait for help. When you're doing training, how much emphasis are you placing on that self-aid aspect to save yourself first?
I actually think the self-aid side of things is the most important. I mean, I'll bring it back to the bleeding speed trainer. Or
Yeah,
it teaches you two things actually. It teaches you that you have, people talk about a golden hour, golden 5 minutes. I think it's closer to like a golden minute.
I agree.
And so, if you have something on you, my thrust is to have people having their bleeding control devices on them as opposed to in their trunk. So do you do something to yourself, or do you go to a trunk? You just don't have time to run to somewhere
Right.
to save somebody else or save yourself. It should be on you. And
Yeah.
if you can apply direct pressure to wherever that wound is, you have I think, a much higher chance of keeping blood where it's supposed to be. And I want to say regarding care under fire, like that is a decision point. And I've not been shot at. I've never been the first on the scene when someone was shot at. I've never nearly bled out myself. So I have nothing to say on the topic of care under fire. I'm actually quite oriented towards like school shootings and that sort of thing. And, dealing with bleeding in the civilian world where, just trying to find the simplest way for everybody to keep bleeding where it's supposed to be. So I just
I'll,
want to clarify that.
I'll build on some of that because I've done a lot of active shooter work too. And you want to like I go back and forth with training simulations. Like I believe that children have zero place in an active shooter training scenario. Period. Hard stop. The moral injury associated with that, it's not worth it. Because I can walk into a room of second graders and say, hey, if you see little Johnny pushing red out of him, push real hard on it. Like I can teach a room full of second graders, cute. Like it's not going to be the best, but it's something. Building on that though, so I think one thing TECC, tactical emergency casualty care, tactical combat casualty care. I'm a firm believer that there should be zero medicine being done, and this is controversial, under care under fire and direct threat care because you are in direct line of sight of something that can kill you. If you're a medical provider and you get shot in the head, like you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. I always joke that, hey, the first M in March actually stands for move, motherfucker. Sorry. Explicit warning, sorry. Because if I can move away
Oh
from the threat,
gosh.
that's good. That's going to minimize the threat. And that's like, so Doc Slishman, when you're teaching civilians, like if you have created an acute bleeding scenario, like agriculture is a big one, forestry incidents, commercial or industrial accidents, you still need to move away from the threat because that could be the bandsaw at the Boeing plant that just cut your arm off. So get away from it.
Hmm.
Mike, I'm going to kick it over to you since you've done this work in the civil space. How much emphasis or how much have you seen in the field of like, so one of the failure points I personally see is like when people are applying a tourniquet or some sort of hemorrhage control device, no one is actually attempting to do the direct pressure, the pressure point control while they're putting that device on. Have you seen that same trend?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I do when I go around teaching, and I think Doc heard me say this when I was in the EP, I said, look, all of this stuff, and I bring some super quality things. And this is why I really love working with Liz and Lack and Rescue Essentials, with Slishman and Sam Medical, is that because I think they do bring the best type of products together, and it doesn't, and they just don't care about like the branding, right? They care about the efficacy. And that's why I've always told people like, you know, Dr. Robert Rankin, the X8T that he's out there right now. He's got some stuff and it's reducing speed and then whatnot. And it's like, man, there's a bunch of stuff that's out there. And I show people, I'm like, here's the cat tourniquet and here's the soft T wide. And they know, and my primary was always a soft T wide because I was SoCal TEM specialist. I came from SEB training, right? And then, so I was a soft T wide guy, then I was a cat as a backup, and then I was a SWAT T until I found the Slishman wrap.
Mm-hmm.
And things change and whatnot. And I put all this stuff out there, right? And I say, hey, all this stuff, it is super sexy and it looks amazing on Molly gear and Velcro. And
Yeah.
it's super awesome. And you can just do poses with the amount of tactical Timmy stuff that you can have. It does nothing more than this,
Yep.
right? And that's why I just kind of say like, don't forget the basics of just putting your finger in the hole or clamping the bleed or direct pressure on on some type of anguinal issue or something like that, right? That you are, all you're doing is doing this, but you can't do this and then drag them off the X. So you've got to replace this with a thingy, whatever that thingy is, right? And so and this is why, I was bummed that the whole March Madness didn't kick off, that Liz had kicked off, because you brought up good things. It's
I
like
think it's still going viral.
it
It'll
was
get
one of
there.
those it was
Every
one of
now
those
and
things
then you guys get a like.
it was one of the things where you're like, hey, I was doing the M thing. And I was like, yeah, and then you're doing the A thing. You're like, or if they're just snoring, how about we just position the head?
Yeah.
Treatment, left lateral recumbent recovery position is a form of treatment in the state of Texas for law enforcement officers, not because they touched them, because it continues to open up stuff in the basic way. And I think this is why I'm super excited, because I think, and I don't mean to keep plugging the story because that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm so amped about having Travis and Doc be at this next class because I want to sit there and just listen to them, right? Like
Hmm.
I just want to listen and be a student to them. So, but that's what I've seen.
Hmm.
I think a lot of the training that is out there, I think, to answer your question directly, stop the bleed training is meant to tell people. I'm messing this up, so you're gonna have to edit this a little bit, but the stop the bleed training is trying to counterbalance when doctors called tourniquets medieval torture devices and you're going to lose your limb.
Yeah.
And I think that pendulum has swung so far to the other side. It's like, hey, I've had a varicose vein in a pop, tourniquet high and
Yeah.
tight. And you're
No,
like,
Yeah.
oh,
you, you, you're not wrong in that regard. So I'll kick it over to Travis on this one. My own opinion. I have my own opinion on who should be immediately evaluating tourniquets and whether they're needed. Like when you guys were doing training at the White House Medical Unit, like when you were doing your bleeding control training, who was the first person to take a good, genuine assessment of whether that tourniquet was actually required?
So, I mean, well, we're really big on, we really put the basics right up front there, right? So, I mean, imagine you're the person putting a tourniquet on the President of the United States. So you really have to be like, this is really needed. So
Yeah.
we always actually talk about, okay, and I'm veering off a little bit, Sam, but I'll come back to you.
Very good. You're good.
So we always talk about the basic. We'll talk about chemical biological because that's something people forget, but that's a high risk for a lot of dignitaries and executives. And it could be something as simple as just getting some organophosphate. You can buy that over the counter. It's pretty simple. But one thing we always talk about, say the president gets some schmutz thrown on him from the crowd, right? It could just be some green slime. We all think like the solution to pollution is dilution. Take them right to the shower, decon them. But sometimes it's something as simple as just take off the suit coat and we're done. Take off the suit coat. Let's assess and see where we're at, right? And that's the same thing with bleeding, right? So first thing is check your pulse, then check your patient's pulse, right? Take that tactical pause and look at the patient, be like, okay, do we actually need to throw a tourniquet on? Can it be something as simple as a pressure point? Is it just like a small laceration? So, and that sometimes comes with exposing, right? You take out your scissors. And remember, we're thinking the president, the vice president of the United States are going to cut open their pants real quick, or maybe maybe we take them to a private room and take down the trousers. We take a look at what's actually going on to make sure that we actually need to do it. So you guys have made great points with that tactical pause, check your pulse, check your patient's pulse, because it's super important. Because when you're having these executives that they're pretty important. It could be Bill Gates, it could be Elon Musk, right? You're hey sir, I'm about to start cutting up your pants, throwing a tourniquet on. They might be like, whoa, what? Wait a second.
Yeah.
So yeah, that tactical pause is really important. So we always talk about that in our training is like, do the least that you have to do first, especially if it's in front of the world, because you may be, hopefully we can pull them somewhere private, but if you're in front of the world, say you're right outside of Air Force One, it's pretty out there in front of everybody. So
Yeah.
the least life-saving measures you can do to not worry the world and then go from there. So that's hopefully that answers your question. I kind of veered around a little bit,
No,
but yeah, that tactical pause is super important.
it's spot on. It's focusing on the conservative first before going just blindly aggressive for no good reason. Because that's another unique thing in the EP space is like you may be in a very dense populated urban area, say Boston and around all the level 1 trauma centers. And then you might be on safari in Africa where now you're expected to maintain your principle for 72 hours because you don't have a good evac plan because you forgot. Doc Solution, I want to kick it over to you. I have always when we talk about acute medicine, you worked in the ER, very rarely are there conditions that cause an attending to go running towards a room. And to be fair, I don't think I've ever seen an attending run in a hospital. It's always the R1 who likes to act like their hair's on fire. In the EM space, emergency medical space, in your opinion, what are some of the top time-sensitive medical emergencies that if you don't take immediate action on, you're going to have poor patient outcomes?
Yeah, I'll say the one is defibrillation. I really like that one. I mean, bleeding, of course, is one. I go towards screams a lot. So kids in particular, I find myself being drawn into those rooms as well. But I think you're right that the nurses often drive the behaviors of the docs, and frankly, they're often the first on scene too. And they know a ton, like more than most of us in terms of managing people. So they got marched down. You're right in terms of docs running to rooms. I mean, one of my favorite sayings is, don't just do something, stand there. And
that's good.
I'm complacent, but I just think that getting an assessment of the scene, trying to be calm, and trying to see where you can actually be helpful is pretty important.
So I'm going to
I have a question there.
Sir, go ahead, Liz.
Sorry, I just have a quick question because this is so interesting to me when I think about the listeners in our community for Splints and Whiskey. How executive protection, I'm always the layperson who comes in. I'm like the representative of your wives and children here. We think about the whole community, but I'm sitting here thinking, executive protection has really become more in the forefront. And so a lot of our listeners are asking about, wow, I want to get into that and take this class, for example, that you three are teaching. Like, I just want to go and watch. But people are asking a lot of these questions about what is executive protection? How is it different? And however, they're trained each and every day. I'm just looking at the differences of our guys. They're trained each and every day to just like run to the patient, tourniquet. I mean, the most of my client tourniquet immediately, right? And then care under fire, all of that. So this is a really neat course that you're teaching to think that, okay, what are the most, now you have the student has to really transition, right? The way that they practice, it's different than what they're doing each and every day in EMS, or if they're a tactical medic with the DoD or something and they retire, they want to get into executive protection. You have to really change your skill set almost, right?
Well, I
Than
think
what they'd be doing day in and day out.
Well, I think there's a little bit about this. I know that, I know that Sam and I, we talked about this, and I know that Travis knows this. We're talking about the insult has already happened, right? The
Yeah.
world, and let me quantify this. I am not the triple canopy EP Maharaja guy, okay? I'm a guy that fell into it, and I'm learning it as well too, okay? But I learned something from a cat named Aaron Malden, pretty big dude in the EP space. And he taught me some stuff that was out there. And I will tell you this, we're talking about on the X, the insult has already happened. That, in what I have gathered from the EP space, that is a failure, right? When
Right. That's what
we
and we've seen that now. So it's becoming
correct.
such a topic. Right. Thank
Correct.
you.
So when we've gotten there to the point, something failed, right?
Hmm.
Someone got into the intersterile circle. Someone got, food that was not cooked correctly, and now your principal in Cancun, right, is sick, and now you have to deal with that because you didn't do a proper medical threat assessment or something like that. And so, there's a lot. I think that's why I give my hat off to the Secret Service, is that because of the detailed advanced stuff that I've learned from the White House and from the United Secret Service, has just been, oh my God, this is just insane. I just want to just make sure that there is so much work that is done by these heroes, and they truly are, because they are seen and not heard. They have tons of stuff and practice that they have to go do, the endless amounts of training and working out, and being a brick wall, understanding mentally that they have to be resilient, that they're going to take the first hit and the first shot, right? And then when it all fails, now you have the environment of failure, and now you have to deconflict it and fix it, right?
Yeah.
That's a heavy load.
Yeah, I can second what you're talking about there, Mike. That's actually the motto of the White House Medical Unit: is always present, never seen. That's the motto of that unit, 24/7, 365. But yeah, and I talked about this at the beginning, is it goes back to medical planning, right? And but also my medical plan has to meet Secret Service's tactical plan. So you have to, like, where does this fit? And I think I talked with Liz during the podcast about sexy helicopters. Everybody loves the helicopter, bring it in the helicopter, but I'm going to be honest
Hmm.
with you. You transition from the point of injury to the limo, from the limo maybe to an ambulance, from an ambulance to a helicopter. That's a lot of transitions. So you have to really adjust your plan and make sure you have a sound plan that's going to make sense. Like, maybe we get into the limo, get to a safe spot, then get into an ambulance and into the hospital. And you made a great point. We go to that hospital and we make a very, very deliberate plan with multiple hospitals. And that way they know that POTUS is coming. But Sam, you talked about changing things. We actually are really big on hospitals not changing things, because a lot of them want to be like, hey, you want to use our executive suite ICU? We used it like 2 years ago for the Prime Minister of the UK. And I'm like, 100% no way. I'm like, I want you to use your dirty ER and Cook County that you use every day. We'll just make sure it's cleared out, and then we're same thing for the ICU, because you don't want to change that stuff, because when you change it, that's when accidents do happen. Kind of a long answer for that, but that's where that comes in. All that pre-planning, making sure that they're ready to go, and then of course you talked about earlier, Mike. There's always a Secret Service agent there waiting. So if myself as the tactical medical officer on the ground, I'm like, we have to go to the hospital. They're there. They're ready for the call. They have the hospital ready to go before we even show up. So a lot of those steps in the beginning are very important, because if you don't have a good solid plan in the beginning, yeah, something bad can happen real fast.
I think too, some of the things you're hitting on. So when we talk about executive protection at the White House level, it is a unique operational environment because of how robust that system is. You can go into the 5 different layers of perimeter if you want to, all this other stuff. But when you start looking at private executive protection, you have clients that are expecting essentially what the Secret Service can bring, but on a budget. Like I'm not flying a C. I'm not flying. How many C-17s get moved when Povis moves? Like 17. The number of times I got stuck in nice countries because of those moves was like, yeah, okay. If I'm moving gates, like I might have a private plane, a 12-person detail, and oh, by the way, like the level of medical training might be the EMT level if you're lucky. So like I look at the military medic, the Army medic, for instance, or the Navy corpsman, the Fleet Marine corpsman. I'm a medic for a 40-person platoon, and I'm expected to be the primary care provider and the acute healthcare specialist for that 40-person platoon. Since there is a lot of things that can go wrong in medicine, how much emphasis are you placing on the other, like, so for using the DoD term, disease, non-battle injury aspects, how much of that is being taught in the private EP space?
I want to say this sensitively. There is a big push for standardization. If you know, and this is weird, right? Because you and I have been fire medics, we have been private medics, we've been medics, we've been in the military side. When we want to go do training, it's like, hey, is it post accredited? Peace Officer Standards of Training. Okay, great. Fill out your chit, take it in, take your training hours, off you go, and you get your thing, and it's paid for. Unless you have and this is what I'm learning, unless you have a contract in the private space that says, I'm going to also pay for the executive, the residential security, the movement, and this, that, and the other. And also, by the way, I'm going to pay for your training. Those agents have to seek that training themselves at the cost of the agent, not them, right? And so you can get a wide range of what it is. Now, there is unfortunately, with the healthcare assassination of the CEO in New York, it brought up we need to have better planning. And then the tragedy that happened just recently with Michigan, was that what
Minnesota?
Minnesota, sorry, the Minnesota, stuff is in there. And I was just talking to a very highly respected EP agent that is an owner that works for a senator. And he was like, this has been a big topic because they're forced to pay for their own, right? Unless you meet the C-suites of the POTUS level Tier 1 guys, right? You're paying for this. And so money is hard to come by, right? But then you look at all the lawmakers that are out there that are in there, and so they're just trying to grab at this. And I'll tell you, the State Department, DoD, United States Secret Service, they do not have the resources to provide that level of coverage. So they go out to the privates. Well, capitalism always wins, people, right? And so if I can pay you $50 and instead of $150, I'm going to go with the $50 just so that I've got a guy with a gun in a car, right? None of that comes back to the Sam Slishman training of why am I doing what I'm doing, or the Travis training of like preventative medical threat assessment. And hey, maybe the guy is a CEO, could be overweight, has an allergy to shellfish, and is going to Aqua in San Francisco. Maybe you want to talk about that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anyways, I don't know how to say that answer any way than to say I believe there's a push for a standardization. It is coming. It is based off the Secret Service and the State Department stuff, and I'm really happy to see that. But it's kind of a smorgasbord squishy right now, and those are technical terms.
That is very. That's one thing. Like, too, I have a friend of mine who's DOS, Department of State contracted medic, and he is expected to come out of pocket to maintain his certs.
Yes.
As a U.S. government contractor in direct support to one of our highest risk embassies and ambassadors, you need to pay for your own training, which it is what it is.
Hey, Sam, just Travis, what do you? I just wanted to ask you. Sorry, I'm totally not bogarting, Sam.
You're
But
good.
Travis,
Go for
what
it.
do you think about what I just said? I mean, it's kind of like we're trying to smush the Tier 1 operation, ConOps, into private. That's happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I dabble a little bit in the private space now, and I can tell you that maybe I'm giving away all my secrets of future business opportunities. Maybe we should talk about it. But you know,
Talk
there's
slow as you're
Yeah.
recording this.
I gotta
I
write
mean,
this down.
there's things. If you have first thing, if you have this detail, let's say this detail of 12, you should make sure that detail of 12 or whatever you have, they're all at least TECC basic, right? So they can all.
Yeah.
So if you are the advanced paramedic and you are like doing like the stuff, you have someone that has some extra hands to hold that airway. But when we talk about disease of non-battle illness or just heart attack, stroke, I mean, when you think about the worst case scenario versus most common scenario. The worst case is they get shot. Most common, they're going to have a stroke, a heart attack. They're going to hit their head on a jet ski in Cancun. You got to be prepared for that. So some things I think is important is, first is look at a standard pill pack and build a standard pill pack. Okay, you're going to go to Panama, or you're going to go here. We got your malaria meds, we got your travel medicine, we got some antibiotics for this, we got your traveler's diarrhea, just some basic stuff. And you teach that advanced paramedic or the basic paramedic, and maybe you are maybe I'm working as a chief medical officer and they call you and say, all right, the executive is having diarrhea. Okay, I'll be like, okay, give them this, reassess, let me know how they're doing in about 12 hours. They're doing worse, okay, then we throw in some azithromycin. You make sure that executive is taking their malaria medication every day. That's your job. So that's some pretty standard stuff for just the medical issues that we can do daily, that we can train medics to do. I mean, we've done it in the military for years.
Mhm.
It's not the PA or doc seeing the frontline soldier that's injured. It's usually the medic. So it's really just taking the military space, what we're already doing, and just bringing it to this executive world. And I think a way to standardize that, you have these standardized packs that go out with these medics when they travel to these exotic locations, and it's environment specific, right? Because you're not going to pack the same pill pack for the jungle that you would pack for a safari in Tanzania. You know what I mean? So I think some standardization on that and just the basics, right? Basic vital signs. There's some standard stuff that I think that could come into this space that could be super valuable for executive protection.
Right on. Hey, Doc Slishman, I want to kick it over to you. You've been too quiet. We can't let you just sit there all the day. So have you had any experience in the EMS training space? And also, I have a two-part question. We're going to first focus on training EMS and what your experience has been in that, and then two, you mentioned telemedicine. So let's start with EMS. I'll circle back to telemed. What's your experience training EMTs, paramedics on the street level?
Oh, largely through the hospitals, and frankly, people ask me mostly to talk about traction splints. So that's been my one area. I haven't gone out to say, hey, I'm a trainer, and
Well, I counter argue that because every physician is a trainer, because anytime I bring a patient, there's some
yeah,
little pearls leaned on. And I know, like, you've been working, well, to be fair, traction splints are a force multiplier in themselves, good sir, because I can reduce my trauma, my medication load significantly. On the aspect of telemedicine, what level of telemedicine are you currently doing?
I have a business that's called Priar,
Okay.
and I started it about 15 years ago with my wife, and basically because my neighbors ask me for prescriptions, and there's all kinds of people who ask me for advice, and so I wanted some kind of a business umbrella to make it possible, and
Okay.
that has sort of grown where people know my number, and then they call, and I try to help them through their
Could you
problems.
give the listeners their number, Dr. Schlishman?
No,
Your
don't
number
do
so
it.
they could
No, because then he won't take my calls anymore.
put it in the chat.
Um, so,
Please
so
let
that
them
being
know
said,
about
I want to build on that because
so,
telemedicine
yeah,
is a critical aspect in the austere medical
yeah.
situation. So having been like, so it sounds like kind of concierge telemedicine pseudo. Like, are you having is anybody doing a patient assessment on the other end of the phone?
Occasionally that happens, but more often I have patients call me
So
directly.
you're eliciting the advice out of this patient. So, like, building
Yeah.
on top of that, since in the EP space and pre-hospital space, being able to do a telemed consult is massive. As a person who's had to take phone calls from people with no medical training, what are your, like, top priorities that you would like in a telemed report from somebody in the field who has, like, limited resources and they got to get to what do I need to do for this person?
Good question.
Yeah.
I mean, I need to know the level of urgency, really. So
Well,
a lot of it is, you know, is the person talking to me? Is the person next to the patient right now? Are they breathing? Are they talking? Can I hear them talking in the background? There's an analogous situation that happens a lot. So a relative will call me and their
mhm.
family member is right next to them. And we'll
Yeah.
come up and they sound all wound up, but then I hear whoever it is, like, that's not true, or whatever. So that it helps to have that kind of context. And video is useful also, but a lot of times just the act of answering the phone and just being a level head and talking through as if you're a person trying to give an answer and trying to solve a problem is pretty helpful. I will say this. I preface every conversation. Patients will say, "Hey, can you be my primary care physician?" I'm an emergency physician. I have a one-liner. I say, if you want to get through the night, I'm your guy. If you want to live forever, you need a primary care physician. And so I think that that's somewhat applicable here.
Right.
So people call me quite a bit with just simple lacerations. They're like, "Do I need to go to the ER?" And it's just tip of their finger or something, very small stuff. So a lot of things can be solved with calmness in a conversation too.
Right, which I think that's an incredibly important aspect that we overlook. Is like, hey, having the right person to call, because like having your experience with just bystander phone calls, like, hey, what I need to do is an experience that a lot of people don't genuinely have. Because one of the things I'm guessing it's taught you how to not speak medicine in Latin medical terminology.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, no, that's right.
Yeah. That being said, actually, since I'm trying to, I've got some curiosities. Like, how, when you started doing this, did you find yourself speaking in medical terminology and your patients were like, I don't know what you're saying?
Well, I started this when I was roughly 20 years into medicine. So I've had a good amount of practice talking with people
Yeah.
behind the curtains of VRs and trying to meet them where they are. So it wasn't too hard of a transition to get on the phone and just have a level-headed
Right.
conversation. And I wouldn't say talking down to them, but just finding the words that actually
Right.
resonate.
I think that's one of the things I find in medicine is, well, surgeons are usually the ones that have the hardest in translating their medical terminology into plain English.
Well,
Um,
I just
Go
wanted
ahead,
to
Mike.
say, I know Travis wants to go because I know he's got some good points on this, but I want to bring a life lesson to this because as I know you and Liz, actually everyone on this phone call knows, is so my parents had a pretty significant issue. Um, and so it had been about 5 years since I've been in a level one trauma center, right? And so I'm at this level one trauma center. I am now the patient advocate family person, right? And I'm watching the rounding happen, right? And so all the little docklings are running around behind the attending, right? And then they have their little computers and this, that, and the other. The only person that made eye contact with me was the over 45-year-old attending.
Mhm.
Everyone else was
Wow.
stuck inside of their inside of their iPhone, right? And so
Mhm.
I just want to plug. There was lots of NDAs in the world of executive protection. There was an incident where I had to do telemedicine, and I will tell you that the relationship to be able to speak EMS to a doctor like like Slishman or to Travis and be like, hey man, I see this. I'm looking through an otoscope. I don't know what this means, but here's what it is. How can I do this? Here's the
Hmm.
MOI. Here's the background of it. Here's the sample report. Here's the H's and T's, all that kind of stuff. And to be able to be like, yeah, well now I've got a Travis and a Slishman that can like take on 14 of those dudes, right? That are out in the field doing work into telemedicine. And I think that that's an advancement that is really often overlooked because I mean, I'm sure Travis and Sam would like to be out in the field, right? Getting their hand dirty and this, that, and the other. But also their skill level is like here, right? So for me to be here and be able to interface with them, they can help multiple people while the ground pounders with, one leg out of the tree, we're like, hey, this is what we're seeing. We're not sure. And there's a lot of pre-hospital meds that are out there that we don't give, right? Like Travis and Doc were saying, like, hey, let's give this. Those are not ACLS, PALS, AMLS drugs. But because we're working as an extension of the physician under regulatory control and oversight, that's what separates really good EP medicine and EP teams from the fly-by-nights. And I think that I wanted to make that point, and I'll kick it over to Travis.
No, you got a great point, and I really appreciate your, talking about the human side of medicine. I mean, we all,
Right.
I mean, we're all human beings, right? That a big part of my life is doing global health medicine. And that's a big part of who I am. So we're all human beings, and and sometimes in medicine, I think some people may forget that they think about the case and not the human in front of them. But no, telehealth is such a big force multiplier. I can tell you that I used it at the White House. I'll put a plug in for Global Med. Global Med is a great telehealth system. I mean, you can take pictures of in the ear. I mean, with the ophthalmoscope. And I'll tell you, me as a PA, I had a couple times where I had a major eye issue where I took a nice picture with the ophthalmoscope. And I was able to pull up an ophthalmologist on the other side and show him the picture and be like, "Hey, I'm in Papua New Guinea. What do you think I should evac this person?" I mean, we were out in the bush. This was a vice presidential trip, and they talked me through it, what to do. We managed the patient. We didn't have to evac them because the local
Hmm.
hospitals in Papua New Guinea couldn't handle it. It would have had to been like Australia or something.
Hmm.
So that was me as a PA, but then I've had medics. I took a lot of my executive protection experience, and I had medics for my last 4 years in 17 different countries across Eastern Europe. And we used telehealth. Sometimes it would be Signal, and they would talk me through the symptoms, through their physical exam, and we would determine like what further care to do for the patient. That was a medic. That was a combat medic in the U.S. Army.
Hmm.
So I think telehealth really is a great force multiplier to call that other person on the end. And I think Dr. Slishman, you agree, we've built that trusting relationship where they know, like me, I'm not gonna be like, "Hey, what are you calling me about for?" Like, call me whenever and let's talk through this patient and let's do what's right for this patient. And that's huge for executives because you may not have a doc or a PA with the executive because it's expensive. You may have a
Right.
medic that may cost a little bit less, but they need a little bit extra help managing, making a decision on, is this an appendicitis, or can I just treat this with, antibiotics for the eye, or is this something I need to go to the local ER? Or if it's a major trauma, talk me through the next steps. Because, we talk about the March algorithm, but if you're
Hmm.
72 hours away from anything, then what? Now what? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
That's when we get into prolonged field care. I got kind of a crazy combat story. If I got a minute,
Right.
I had a guy came in. He was actually came in on the ambulance, and half of his intestines were actually out of his stomach. And I was not. This was a more forward aid station. This was in Iraq, and my medic, he called me on Teams actually, on a Teams thing, and he's holding up the computer and he's like, "Hey doc, what the f do I do with this?" And the guy's like wide awake, like doing fine, like in a lot of pain, but like, and I was like, "All right, check it out." So I talk him through just putting on the sterile glove, just kind of massaging the belly and letting the intestine just fall back in because we couldn't get evac for about 6 hours. In those days, we got
Mhm.
a helicopter within an hour, but it was 6 hours because we had the moon dust.
Right.
But I mean, that was a big time for my medic to reassure him, like, "Hey, you got this. Let's get some ketamine on board. We'll put the guts back in." And he saved a life. So I like to share that story because it was the first time I think I ever actually used telehealth on like a
Oh yeah.
Teams computer, and it worked
Mm.
out. So it's a great force multiplier in the EP space.
I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's a
No.
great spot to be. I just want to tell you, like every freaking, compliance officer is rolling over in their grave in tonic-clonic seizures with that story, right? Right. But I
I
will
think we
tell
have insurance.
you, no,
No.
but that's the thing, right? It's like when even I had an issue with a health thing, and I called doc, right, and I said, hey, what would you do in this situation, right? It's like medics are really good about putting their hands in the mire, right? We're good with deconfliction.
Sure.
What we don't have is 2 years, 4 years, 6 years of just being grinded in medical practice, right, about this whole thing. But we'll do whatever you want to do. And I think, and this is why I truly believe that paramedics and EMTs are a huge essential piece in the executive protection world because we can extend ourselves just like EMS.
Yeah.
If you think about every time that someone has a cardiac arrest or you know, has a STEMI on a plane, what are you doing? Is there a doctor on the board?
Yeah.
No. Okay. Is there a podiatrist?
Right.
Paramedic, right? And then you get a paramedic, and then you get on the phone, you put on a little funny headset, and you're talking to med control. So you go through like, hey, I'm a paramedic, I've done this one, and you do that. Why? It's like we're already doing it. You know, the
Hmm.
common denominators, we're already doing this. So if you just pay for the right stuff, then you get the right equipment and personnel and the training. And I think that that is what I have learned in this process. Not everyone's going to be a whiskey, right? Not everyone's going to be a PJ. Not everyone's going to be this, that, and the other. You may just get a guy that just needs to hear Sam's voice or Travis's voice. Like, Breaker 19. I don't know what to do with guts outside of the belly, and you're like, okay, I do. So you're going to do this. I'm like, I can do this, right? So it's awesome. So great
So,
story.
so I'm gonna
Yeah.
jump in, guys. We're getting close to time. Doc Lishman, I want to kick it over to you since Travis and Mike, those are your closing thoughts. Sorry if you want to say anything else. Doc Lishman, you got anything else you want to say?
No, I mean, if I ever got into executive protection, I think I would really struggle. There's a saying, another saying, the trouble you don't get into, you don't have to get out of. And I
Right.
would,
Yeah.
um, if I had some executive who wants to go to some wacky bar in the middle of the night, I don't know where the line is. Like, why don't you just stay home? Let's just
Yep.
stay home, watch some
Well,
Netflix or something like that.
Mm,
well,
I would struggle.
it all comes down to risk mitigation. I think Mike, you hit the nail on the head. You pay for what you get for. That's plain and simple. And the unfortunate thing is the space we all work in is risk mitigation, and you can't prove that the risk mitigation worked because nothing happens. So that's the fun
mm.
fact about it all. So hey guys, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. Liz, thanks for jumping on with us too. Mike Marsh,
Yeah.
Dr. Sam Slishman, Travis Kaufman,
Mm.
Liz Arts, thank you guys for your time. And again, if you're looking for any help in the medical procurement space or training aids or whatever, look up laccinc.com. Sam Plagic for Splints and Whiskey. Thanks a lot. We'll catch you next time.